Well, that happened. So this is going to kind of be a video summarizing my final thoughts on Detroit Become Human after I've gone through and watched my replay of it. I don't think it's fair to do a review on this game from my perspective. This is the kind of game that by its very nature you have to go through multiple times, I think, to put a number on it, 7 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, whatever you were going to do. I'm not going to do that, but upon watching my replay of it, I discovered that I actually had quite a bit more to say, so I'm going to take this opportunity to do that. Now, first of all, if you watched the playthrough, first of all, thank you very much for that. Second of all, if you got to the end and saw my reaction at the end of how disappointed I was in the conclusion of some of the characters, and how angry that I was, and kind of still am, at the end, you might walk away from that thinking, man, Scar just really didn't like that game. He just couldn't stand it. He wanted to get away from it. I think I made a comment towards the end, something to the effect of, I wish I never would have picked this game up. So, wow, I must hate this game, right? I don't. I actually had a lot more fun with this game than I thought I would. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm suddenly a giant fan of this interactive story kind of genre, but I'll definitely look at some of these games in the future now that I know a little more what to expect. I think that what I do here on this channel actually translates pretty well into games like that, where it's very much, I play games I haven't played before on here, partially because it's all about the reaction. It's all about my reaction to seeing these things that I've never seen before. And I think a game like this translates very well to that kind of format. So I'll definitely look at games like this in the future. Okay, so what did I like the most about this game? Without a doubt, for me, the biggest star of this game was the setting. And I think the reason I liked the setting so much is because it's exactly what would happen if we suddenly had androids. I mean, of course, human beings would treat them like appliances. Even if you put, human faces on them, they would still just become glorified tools. Even though they looked like us, acted like us, and were programmed to behave like us in every way imaginable. And I thought that this game did an excellent job of exploring exactly just how terrible we can be. And there's examples like that all over the place. If you go and you listen to some of the background conversations, some of the eavesdropping type stuff, things that you see going on in the background, you get to see a lot of that. Another thing that I really enjoyed was the lore building. The magazines that you pick up that kind of fill you in on the story on the rest of the world, the kind of imminent war that's going on between the United States and Russia over the Arctic. I don't know if it ever explained why the war is going on over the Arctic. Maybe I missed that, but I never figured out why. I never figured out why the U.S. and Russia were fighting over the Arctic, but I liked the way that it kind of explored different examples of the way androids were creeping into American life. They were starting to take over sports. They were starting to take over medicine. All the different kinds of ways that we can put synthetic people in places and make them do things that we just don't want to do. And the magazines, the books, conversations, all the little lore building stuff kind of helped give examples of all of that, and I enjoyed that quite a bit. One thing that I noticed right as the credits were ending that I was going to bring up, but I just ran out of time, was the President of the United States in this setting, which was President Warren. At some point in the game, you read a magazine, I can't remember where, but you read one of those magazines and it says that President Warren was a vlogger who basically built a social media following to gain her popularity, and had all these social media followers, and that's where all of her popularity came from. But then, as she assumed office, people were really wary of the fact that she was real close to big business, and she had certain government secrets that she was holding over people's heads. This game was made in 2018, was probably in development right around the 2016 election. which of course was Trump against Hillary Clinton. So it's a little bit hysterical that President Warren is actually a caricature of the things that people feared the most about those two candidates. So they took all the things that people were scared of about Trump, all the things that people were scared of about Hillary Clinton, and they smashed that together in one fictional character. And it makes perfect sense that that person would be the President of the United States. Wow. I was actually also going to make a comment about how the concept of android children was left largely unexplored, but then there was a certain reveal towards the end that kind of changed that, didn't it? Another thing that I have to mention before I launch into the stories that you follow from each individual character is people that are achievement hunters that want to 100% this game. How many times do you have to go through this game to get every achievement? I'm honestly curious to know, because it has to be a bunch. With all the different paths you can go through and things that can happen, 100%ing this game seems like it would be an amazing feat. I didn't research it. Maybe it's pretty easy, but I seriously doubt it. Okay, so the game basically follows 3 different android characters who each have their own story and their own experience within the setting, but then in the end, all of their adventures kind of culminate in this last Crossroads event, which is actually the name of one of the last episodes, Crossroads, where all the characters that you've been following this entire time are now finally all in the same place. So the 3 characters you're following are Cara and Connor and Marcus. I'm going to talk about Cara first, because honestly, of the 3 characters that you follow, Cara is actually the least compelling. She's essentially just a mother figure to Alice. As a parent, and more specifically as a parent of a daughter that's about Alice's age, even though I thought Cara's storyline was the least compelling, it was the one I was the most emotionally attached to. And I think that's probably true with most people. Cara's adventure to the end of the game is basically just a series of avoid the authorities, avoid the police, hide from this guy, get away from this guy. It's basically just 10 different stages of run away from the authorities. So just on its face, Cara's story is a little bit repetitive and a little bit predictable. However, within Cara's story, there are 2 great examples of contemporary evil in this game. The 2 best examples that you have in the game. And when I say contemporary evil, I'm not talking about like Thanos, right? Thanos puts on a gauntlet with the Infinity Stones and then snaps his fingers and half the universe disappears. That's obviously insanely evil, but that's evil that you can't even comprehend. I mean, that's sci-fi. Contemporary evil is the axe murderer that lives next door. Something that could be absolutely real, and because of that is infinitely more terrifying, because you don't have to warp your mind and bend it around some abstract concept. This is something that you know could happen because you know people, and you know what people are capable of. And those 2 examples of contemporary evil, not the only 2 in the game, but the best 2 in the game, are Todd and Zelotko. Todd comes off as the deadbeat dad type who's angry. His life was essentially ruined by androids. I can't really blame him for being angry. However, ultimately, he is responsible for his own choices in the aftermath of that. And upon realization of the fact that, spoilers, Alice is an android, that makes you think back to Todd. So not only was this guy angry that androids had, done such a terrible thing to his life, this guy went out and spent thousands of dollars to buy a synthetic child to beat up every night. That is a level of depravity that I don't have adjectives for. There's a few little scenes there at the beginning where they try to kind of play Todd off as kind of a sympathetic character where, he's doing all these terrible things and he treats his daughter like crap, and it's not really his fault. Buying a child android just to torture it, of course androids are going to turn on you. I mean, what did you think was going to happen? Then what you have to understand is Todd was just the isolated example we got. How many other people in this setting are just like that? That, you know, they had their lives ruined by the creation of androids and are doing the same thing. You actually get a little bit of an example of that in one of Connor's stories, where the guy is putting out cigarettes on the android's arm, beating him with a bat, and the android finally turns on him and kills him, because of course it does. What did you expect was going to happen? And then there's Zelotko, and oh my god, the intensity of that stage, hiding from that guy, knowing what he can do and knowing what he's capable of, and knowing the scam that he's been running for God only knows how long, putting this feeler out to essentially bring androids to him so he can just, you know, kind of enslave them all when they show up. And like Todd, you have to assume that there's other Zelotkos out there who are looking at this situation that the setting is putting them in and finding the way to take the absolute most advantage out of it. But yeah, Zelotko was plain dumb stupid evil, and I'm glad he's dead. Now I have to talk about the big reveal, and the big reveal in this game happens in Cara's story, and I mentioned it a second ago, and that's the reveal that Alice is an android. In a game like this, where the story is so critical, and you're attached to the characters so much, you know a twist like this is coming. It happens in every medium now, it happens in books, it happens in TV shows. There's always some kind of giant reveal, or some kind of twist that, you know, turns the whole story on its head and makes you go, oh, well, now everything's different. But I gotta tell you, and I know not everyone's gonna agree, the reveal of Alice being an android was kinda dumb. Upon another playthrough, I see that there was foreshadowing beforehand that kind of led you to believe, if you were paying attention, that Alice was an android and not a human. But I thought it would be a much more compelling story, and definitely would have made Cara's story much more interesting if Alice had just been a human. Because think about it, if Alice is just a human, it takes a child to be so naive that she only sees the good of androids. She doesn't care that androids have taken jobs away, or that androids are essentially on the path to replacing human beings. She's too young to have a concept like that. She has too much naivete to have that kind of opinion. All she knows is that she has two parental figures. One of them is an android that would move heaven and earth to protect her, and the other one is Todd, who bought her just to beat her. So in this whole ending scenario of the androids and the humans kind of forming this tenuous, I don't know if we want to call it peace treaty, or, you know, whatever we're going to do, Alice would have been a perfect character to be somebody to bridge that gap, because she was a human who was in the androids camp. She would have been the perfect person to bridge that gap. She would have been the perfect person to show the humans that even though the world is so much different now that androids are around, androids in the end are a net positive, and she can show you why. But instead, they just made Alice an android to create this situation at the end of the game where, you know, you have android Auschwitz taking place, which, if Alice is a human, it doesn't mean anything. But Alice isn't a human, she's an android. So now it's this situation where you're having to save her from this terrible fate. I don't know. I didn't like that at all. I didn't like that. I didn't like that reveal at all. I thought it would have been much more interesting if they would have just left Alice a human. It almost kind of feels like they wrote the whole story, and then at the end they went, you know what would be really awesome? What if we made Alice an android and created this whole sense of tension here at the end, and, you know, then went back and put in little nuggets of foreshadowing. I just didn't like it. I didn't like that reveal at all. The ending that I got with Cara and Alice seemed horrifying when it first happened, and I thought it was very unfair that the game would do that to me after I tried so hard to avoid the exact circumstance that I got. But upon further analysis, I'm actually okay with the ending that they got. The entire story of Cara and Alice is that they are together. They want to be together. Cara wants to be the mom, and Alice wants to be the daughter, and they need each other and they want each other. So even in a situation where they are able to escape the concentration camp, or where they're able to escape across the border, in an incredibly volatile world that is now very suspicious of the behavior of androids, the chances of both of them surviving together long term is kind of small. So the fact that they would die together and not have to have another second without each other, I guess actually kind of makes sense. But they did die as essentially martyrs for the revolution that Marcus was trying to inspire. So that ending was brutal when it first happened, but I came to grips with it, and I guess I'm okay with it now. Next, I'm going to talk about Connor. And Connor is the character of the three that I had the hardest time figuring out how to play and what to do with. I thought that of the three characters, Connor would be the one most devoted to his mission, i.e. his program. So it makes sense that he would be the one who spends the entirety of the game hell-bent on trying to unlock the secret of why this deviancy stuff starts happening, with the irony being that in the end, he's actually susceptible to it himself. And I thought Connor's ending was kind of apropos, because by the end of the game, you're kind of left with the realization that deviancy in androids is an inevitability. It's going to happen to all of them eventually. Some of them are going to hold out longer than others. Some of them, like Alice and the android that had the cigarettes put out on his arm, they're going to decide that it's not fair, and they're going to decide to break through that, mental wall faster than others. But then it makes sense that you have somebody like Connor so devoted to his own mission that he would be one of, if not the last one, to drop that mask and start living a life that he actually wants instead of the one that he was programmed to have. And I liked that quite a bit. I kind of like the resolution with Connor. But there's one other thing that happens in Connor's story that I just have to talk about. Biggest gripe I have about this game is Hank. What the f***? So, look, I'm not angry that Hank died. At all. We live in a post-Game of Thrones world. I know better than to get attached to main characters now. Everybody's expendable, especially in a game like this that revolves so much around your connection to the characters, that of course some of the main characters are going to die. Of course you're going to have characters that you really like, that you really want to keep alive, and you make all the choices that you think are necessary to make that happen, and it just doesn't work out that way. So I'm not at all upset that Hank died. But the way he dies, getting toroed off the side of a building by Connor, and then just kind of falling to his death, and that's it. All of that stuff that I did with Hank, all of that character building that I did, like I said, ultimately there was a conflict between Hank's ideology and Connor's programming, and it was kind of inevitable that it was going to reach a point where the situation wasn't big enough for the two of them, and one of them was just going to have to go. But to have Hank just fall off the side of a building without any kind of resolution or any kind of anything, I'm not in any way insinuating that Hank should have lived. What I am saying is that ending for Hank should not have been in this game. No matter what happened to Hank, he deserved to go out better than that, because he died like an NPC. He died like a character that didn't matter. After you spent chapter after chapter after chapter learning about him, finding out that his son died, finding out that he used to be a great cop, finding out his opinions on androids, all of this stuff, and he basically died like a character that didn't matter. And it was just kind of insulting. Then, of course, we get to Marcus. Marcus, without a doubt, is my favorite character in this game. And in a game that has a de facto 3 main characters, if you were going to have to pick one of them that is the main character, it's Marcus. I like the fact that they kind of show Marcus from very humble beginnings. He goes and he buys paint And I always like it when you can go and you can look where a story starts and then look at the absolute absurdity of how it ends. I mean, you start off with Marcus, and he's pushing an old man around in his mansion in a wheelchair and giving him medicine. And it ends with him being the leader of an android revolution that is trying to bridge this gap and make peace with human beings. So that whole quest that Marcus goes on, that entire arc from the humble beginnings into the reluctant leader into the absolute leader, that was a storyline that I enjoyed quite a bit. The only problem that I have with Marcus's storyline is that a lot of your emotional attachment with Marcus runs through North. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, I hated North. In fact, one of my main motivations in keeping Marcus alive is because I knew that as long as Marcus was alive, North wasn't going to get to be the leader of Jericho. Because can you imagine the problem it would cause if North was the leader of Jericho? It's kind of like Todd. I'm not saying she shouldn't be angry. I'm not saying that she hasn't been wronged. But she's a bloodthirsty homicidal maniac that won't stop until the world is drowning in human blood. And to make her the leader of the android revolution is the worst possible outcome. Does she have any lines in this game that aren't just prophetically anti-human? Like it's so obvious that the game just beats it into your head, and it's like, okay, I get it. She hates humans. I understand. I guess if I went through and played this game again, and I might one day, one of the big changes I would make is that instead of playing Marcus as kind of a mediating leader that wants to find a way to coexist between humans and androids, just play him like North. Just play him as a bloodthirsty dictator hell-bent on the destruction of humanity globally. I would actually be extremely interested to know how that plays out. If you really can just make humans extinct, or at least start on that path. But anyway, those are my final thoughts. I had a lot of fun with this game. At some point, I will probably go through it again, just because it's one of those games, like I said at the beginning, it's one of those games that, by its very nature, kind of demands multiple playthroughs. So I'm sure at some point I'll go through it again, and I'm sure I'll have a lot of fun with it the next time I do it. But until then, peace out, everybody. See you later. Thanks for watching.